All right, why don't we get underway? I think everyone who wants to be here is here by now, and so I want to welcome you all, and good evening. And this is our regular meeting of council for December 16th, which I will now call to order. First item of business, of course, is adoption of the minutes of the council meeting held December 2nd. Do I have a mover and a seconder? So, Councillor Neufeld, seconded by Councillor Powell-Davidson. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Now moving to approval of our agenda this evening. And again, I have a recommendation that our agenda be approved. Moved by Councillor Lefebvre, seconded by Councillor Greer. Any additions to the agenda, changes? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to our delegations this evening, of which we have one delegation. And we have Mr. Bray on behalf of Shaw Communications, and this is regarding the Shaw Metro Area Wi-Fi Network. So, Mr. Bray, welcome to our council meeting this evening. We generally like to keep this to within 10 minutes, and then we usually have an opportunity for council to ask questions as well after. So the floor is yours, sir, and carry on.
Super. Well, thank you very much, Your Worship and Council. And I won't go through the presentation page by page as you've got it, because I'm sure you've had a look at it, and a lot of it's more background information. What I was hoping to do today is, or this evening, is just go over Shaw's Go Wi-Fi rollout across Western Canada, and then speak more specifically about Parksville and what we would like to potentially do here in Parksville with the municipality, if that works for you. So as the deck that you have talks about, it references the way in which people use broadband or internet or wireless, and how it's become such a ubiquitous part of our daily society that we now look at things like internet as a basic utility, whereas not so long ago, if family budgets were stretched, cable was sometimes one of the things that was let go, and now it's seen as a vital part of how people operate, how they communicate, and really the whole way in which we're connected to the internet, and we use wireless data to transmit everything from Facebook page messages to council documents and other communications. It's really become something that people depend on and utilize really on a daily basis. And certainly if you've got teenagers like myself, you know that they pretty much live on their wireless devices. Some years ago, Shaw was looking to potentially go into the cellular market and build out a national cellular offering like other companies. And ultimately, we decided that it was a very expensive proposition, and there was lots of other people that were providing that service. And it didn't really play to Shaw's strength, which is the fact that we now have the fastest network in Canada, and we really are a broadband internet leader. But we still wanted to provide a wireless experience for our customers, our home internet customers, so that they could take their devices and still be connected to the internet and make use of it in that way. And so we landed on Wi-Fi as our approach to providing a mobile experience for our customers. And essentially, Wi-Fi is just another way of wirelessly connecting to the internet. But unlike cellular, which is a licensed spectrum that you have to get a license from the federal government and operate in that fashion, Wi-Fi is unlicensed spectrum, and that's why you see it in coffee shops and all sorts of locations. It really allows people to take their device, any device that's Wi-Fi enabled, and connect into the internet. And so what Shaw has done is looked at all of those places that our customers and others would like to be connected to the internet outside of their home, where they've already got their internet connection, and if they so choose a wireless router, and the office, where people are connected all sorts of different ways. So we've really looked at that third place, where people congregate and would want some connectivity to the internet. So coffee shops, restaurants, entertainment facilities, shopping malls. One of our more popular locations for utilization is actually, those quick lube oil change places. People are sitting in their car waiting for their oil to get changed. They do some emails, they do some work, and they connect up to the internet. For everybody who's got cellular plans, of course, they also provide the same service. You buy a data plan from your cell carrier, and you can connect to the internet and do various things. With Shaw Go Wi-Fi, there's no charge for our customers, and so it actually is a value add. It allows them to connect to the internet, and they're not using their data plan on their phone or their tablet or their iPhone or their Android. They're actually using their Shaw internet connection. We also don't charge the businesses where we are located to place the equipment. We simply make an arrangement with them, an agreement, and we install a small access point, and they can provide the service to their customers. There's no charge for them, and they get some marketing as a result of that. So it's really something that we see as a very positive attribute to enhancing communications in our communities. The other thing with Shaw Go Wi-Fi is because we're only covering those what we call third places, we've been able to roll out well over 20,000 locations so far in Western Canada, and we're probably about halfway complete. But each one of our access points, little antennas if you will, are connected directly into our network. So at the end of the day, we're going to have a network of 50,000 hotspots, if you will, all connected into the internet that makes it something that's truly unique in Canada. We're already the third largest Wi-Fi network in North America, behind small companies like AT&T and Cablevision. So we are making this significant investment, and we think it's providing a level of communication that people appreciate. And as we have rolled this out, of course, we know our customers really value it, families really value it, the businesses really value it. But one of the things in Canada, unlike in many of the U.S. cities, is most cities over the course of time have taken some of their utilities and put them underground, so the cable plant and electrical wires, various other things. So some of those third places that Shaw would like to connect up, including streets or commercial areas, sometimes our cable plant is underground. So the only way we can provide coverage is actually partnering with the owners of those facilities, which happen to be municipalities. Also, municipalities have a lot of the parks where people congregate to watch soccer games, play softball. You often have the spirit squares or other public gathering areas, the hockey arenas, the libraries, these types of facilities, City Hall. So in addition to our business partners, we've also been concluding access agreements with municipalities across Western Canada to extend that network onto and into municipal infrastructure. And essentially, how we work with municipalities is we either offer negotiate a commercial arrangement whereby we provide a fee for each of the attachments that we place on a light stand in a park, on a concession stand, or indoors in council chambers or in the recreation center, those locations. And the Shaw Go Wi-Fi network's there, and it's available for Shaw customers. The other option that we've explored and that many cities have taken us up on is that we will actually extend access to the Shaw Go Wi-Fi network to everybody who's in that facility, whether they're a Shaw customer or not. So essentially, it's providing free Wi-Fi from any of those access points that are on or in municipal infrastructure. Shaw provides all of the equipment. We pay for all the installations. It's the same folks that do the work in town now, same blue trucks. We cover all of the costs, all of the maintenance. There's no outlay from the city whatsoever. It's really an exchange for access. So what we would love to do with the city of Parksville is if we can enter into an access agreement to extend that network onto and into municipal infrastructure that would extend that network both potentially, certainly for Shaw customers, but potentially also for non-Shaw customers, tourists, visitors, whomever else may be in those public facilities and wanting to access that they can use the Shaw Go Wi-Fi as a guest. And that's essentially the pitch. In your package, there's just a lot more conversation about how people are using the internet, and in particular data, which is what most people do now. The cell phone and using it to actually talk is becoming a minority use of these devices. The other thing I'd like to point out in Shaw making these investments, and I mean, obviously it's tens of millions of dollars to build this network out. it was really intended initially just to be an extension of service for our customers. But like any new network that you build out, unforeseen positive consequences come out of having that network. As you may recall, this summer, Calgary had sort of once-in-a-lifetime floods that really paralyzed the city, including their downtown core, where in some cases people who live downtown and work downtown were unable to access either their home or their office, where really it was a very severe situation. Well, Shaw had built out, of course, hundreds and hundreds of these access points throughout downtown, and the shops and the buildings and the malls. Given that communication was under such stress, we were actually able to open up all the access points in Calgary for everybody to make use of, so that they could get bulletins, updates from the city, they could communicate with family members. And it was one of those things that we never would have thought of when we started this process a couple of years ago. But once you've got the network built, in fact, there are all sorts of things that ultimately it could be used for. So, certainly that was something that I know Mayor Nenshi was able to point out sort of in the aftermath, that was one of the many critical things that companies and individuals did to step up in that time of need. But obviously, up-to-date and real-time communications was a real strain, and the cell companies were inundated and were having real trouble providing that service. We were an additional service that was available. So that's essentially what we would like to talk to, and certainly I'm available to answer any questions. Some of the other cities on Vancouver Island that we've reached agreements on include Nanaimo, Victoria, Oak Bay, Esquimalt, Langford, West Shore, Parks and Rec, and then there are other municipalities that we are in active conversations with just on Vancouver Island. So I'm happy to open it up for questions and go from there, Your Worship.
All right, thank you very much. So we will do just that. So I already saw at least one hand in the air. I think Mark beat you to it, Peter, but go ahead, Councillor Lefebvre.
Oh, there it is. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm a neophyte, so my questions may sound somewhat strange. When you talk about Wi-Fi, is there a security issue of any form? Like I haven't had Wi-Fi in my home yet, but I'm getting it because I've got to get it. And I have an iPad that I can use where there is Wi-Fi, so I do that. I went to Shaw and I wanted to get it installed, and I have to install it myself, so that's going to be fun and games. But what about the security issue? I hear people talking about security concerns when you have Wi-Fi, for example, in your home. And does that translate into Wi-Fi when you have it in a municipal structure?
Well, like any and first of all, just so you know, my VCR still flashes 12 at home, so I'm not the technical person either. Certainly with any technology, very smart people, if they really, really want to, can certainly, they can hack into any system they want. Essentially, Wi-Fi is not any different than your internet connection at home. The only real area of exposure is between your device and the antenna that's hardwired into our system. So yes, if somebody wanted to sit back here and spend an hour, they could potentially hack into a system. But it's not, any more secure or less secure than others. What I can tell you is that Shaw, as sort of one of the leading edge companies with respect to Wi-Fi, we're part of a consortium with some U.S. companies that are looking at some of the new things you can do with Wi-Fi, including Wi-Fi roaming and others. And one of the requirements is actually to increase the security encryption so that even between your device and the antenna 20 meters away would actually be secure. So we're certainly leading that charge, but there's no significant concern with security.
Follow up, Your Worship, for me.
Why don't we allow Councillor Morrison this question, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I've certainly noticed a lot lately, almost every time I bring up my wireless access, there's a Shaw connection there all the way out to Little Qualicum, or Big Qualicum campsite. There's a wireless hotspot right in the middle of the campsite. The questions I've been getting lately is, whenever I bring the subject up, is where, now that you spent millions of dollars creating all of these spots, when are they going to start getting charged for it? Right. So always that question's almost first or second in the group. I just wanted to see if you had any. feedback on that.
Well, and a lot of people sort of say, well, okay, you're building this thing out and then you're not charging, so where's the business case? Well, as you can imagine, with competition, breeds a lot of, I'm getting services from company A and then I flip to company B. Well, company A loses my revenue. Company A's got to send a truck out to get my equipment, and then company A's got to spend time trying to win my business back. Then I leave company B and I come back to company A 6 months. So that churn is a very expensive proposition. What we've decided is really it's a retention play, is to provide something of value that other companies may not be in a position to provide. Most of our competitors, whether it's TELUS, SaskTel, MTS, are in the cellular business. So for them to provide free Wi-Fi at tens of thousands of locations essentially cannibalizes their own business. So it's really something that's unique in the marketplace that's very few companies are going to be able to do at any degree, let alone the degree we are. So for us, the value is actually being able to provide a service that keeps our customers with us and potentially attracts other customers as well. You've certainly seen some of the ads on television. But in addition, we also feel that even since we started building this out, others have come to us with ways you can use Wi-Fi that we hadn't really thought of when we started to build this thing. So, like broadband 15 years ago, how this will actually get used in the future is really part of the exciting part. The advantage for Shaw is we will already have the network out and about.
All right. Go ahead, Councillor Neufeld, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Lefebvre.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Mr. Bray, thanks very much for the presentation. As a shareholder of Shaw, I always want to look at the business plan and say, how are we making money for me? How are we doing it? Is it basically on a subscriber basis that use our service? And that being the case, why can't TELUS cannibalize it? Why, they in fact are providing similar services as far as Wi-Fi is concerned.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So essentially, by being able to provide something in the marketplace that keeps our customers with us, that's actually the payback for us. So if you're a home internet customer, you get this as a value add. If you go to another company, you lose this service potentially. For a company like TELUS, just to use them as an example, but it could be SaskTel, it could be MTS, they sell data plans for every single device that you have in a household. $20, $30, $40, $50. If all of a sudden they were providing free Wi-Fi everywhere, well then I might not need to pay for a data plan. Or maybe I have one, but my two teenagers don't need one now because they're always around free Wi-Fi. So it's not really in their interest to build this type of network to then compete against the one that they're charging people for. So that's the difference between Shaw Go Wi-Fi and perhaps what some of the other competitors are doing, is they would actually eat into their own business plan, whereas we're providing a value add for our customers who already have our home internet product.
All right, Councillor Lefebvre.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Bray, on one of your pages here, you've got a sentence I'm going to read. In consideration for access to municipal infrastructure, Shaw will provide free Wi-Fi from access points on or in municipal property. The Parksville Downtown Business Association was looking at a proposal to make sure that one of the big advantages to being in Parksville is you could access Wi-Fi from anywhere within the downtown area. And our downtown area is the highway to Jensen, where we are, to help me here, to McMillan as far as Corfield. So with the installation of Wi-Fi in this building and in the engineering building, which would be down in the industrial park if that's where it was to go, how big an area would the Wi-Fi cover? Would it cover the downtown, for example?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. One of the advantages to Wi-Fi is that they actually cover quite a small area, so you only ever have a few people on any given antenna, and that's what makes the experience so robust. So the download speed for our access points is 250 megabit, which I know is a technical thing, but it's a significant, for people who do know about bandwidth, I mean, it's very significant. And you only have a handful of people on any particular access point. The other advantage is that because it's only covering a small area, we don't need towers or any of those types of structures. We can pretty much put them anywhere. The range for an indoor access point is about 20 square meters. An outdoor access point, we would sort of look for 100 meters, 150 meter radius. So you would need to have several ultimately in downtown to provide that kind of coverage. What we look for when we're determining where we would attach, if we were to have an agreement, is we need access to our cable plant in some fashion. We need to be able to connect them up to the network. And we need access to 24-hour power. Those are the two sort of main things we look at. So obviously, in the downtown area, quite a bit of the cable plant is underground. So we would have to look at how we would be able to make those connections. But certainly, I know that lots of mid-sized communities and BIAs, that's exactly what they're looking for. And one of the reasons why this has kind of come along at a good time is it's actually meeting a need for municipalities who are looking to provide something like this, but aren't yet really, or aren't in a position to add yet another utility or another service, but this seems to be a good match. So certainly what we've done with other municipalities is we work with staff to determine locations that maybe we haven't recognized, and then we go to do our due diligence to actually see what the cost would be, connect up certain areas and certain streets, or use other techniques to provide that coverage.
All right, so we've gone around. We still have some questions. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Greer, and then Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and that was a good presentation. The only question I have is if we did something here in the city, would we do it outside? If it was on the outside of this building, would we need it on the inside as well?
We do both, and again, that's part of. Most people are familiar with Wi-Fi being in the coffee shop or the the indoor locations. We actually do both. So the indoor locations, absolutely. I mean, we would look to do a place like council chambers, maybe the area where people are dealing with staff and getting engineering questions or paying property tax. Recreation facilities, places where people are congregating. Parks, so outdoor locations where, say you've got stands for parents to be watching the kids play baseball. We can put an access point there that allows them to do some stuff on their iPhone when their child's not up to bat or anything. We would also look to do potentially commercial streets. So actually, where people are parking their car, going into a retail shop, then going down the street to a coffee shop, so where people are actually walking on the street, we would look to potentially do coverage there. Again, access to our plant and power being sort of key things that we. But it would be both indoor and outdoor.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. So when I've had my iPad here and it comes up Shaw Open, is that you?
Yes.
And so how did you get here?
Well,
yeah.
we may be in another location, and so what happens is, Wi-Fi doesn't sort of hit 150 meters and stop. So what happens is your device may be able to see that access point, but it may or may not be able to do very much with it. But we may be in one of the other tenants nearby.
And so you're actually already doing it,
but
not through the municipality, per se, not through the city of Parksville.
That's correct. But we're already in businesses up and down the island and in Parksville and lots and lots of locations. And what we're looking to do is to just extend that network into some of those other places where people congregate that are managed or controlled by the city. And
so in Calgary, when they had the flood, were you part of the Emergency Social Service Network formally, or did it just happen by accident?
No, it was something that, of course, lots of companies responded. I mean, our offices were closed. I mean, it was significant, and our headquarters happened to be there. But this was as the city was putting calls out for some of the critical issues and things that they were really needing right away. This was one of the ones. There was lots of other things, but one of the ones that we were able to do was actually at the network end, just open up the access points to allow people to connect throughout Calgary. And we did that for quite a significant period of time, and it just eased the burden on the other communications providers that were just inundated, especially cellular. And so, I mean, I couldn't tell you, did the mayor call Bradshaw or it was something that we responded to, though, very quickly because we realized, hey, we've actually got this network here, and this is something that we can provide. So even though people couldn't travel, the network was still all working.
All right. Yeah, 5 networks locally, and you're right, there's a Shaw Open network. I suspect it's one of our private tenants that are here, although it's a pretty weak signal from this location, which would be expected as well. Any other questions from members of council? Right. So my suggestion to council is, if you so wish, is you could pass a resolution directing staff to look at this agreement and then come back to us with the particulars. One thing that sort of struck me, because you did mention how you were able to assist in that devastation in Calgary, I suppose then within the context of an agreement, you could have, should an emergency be declared, to have a willingness to make those networks open right in the agreement, could you not?
We could certainly take a look at that. I mean, one of the things that we have in our agreements are no service level agreements with the city, so we don't make any requests of the city. So our concern is always just to make sure that in an agreement we don't overpromise and underdeliver. But certainly, you know, as good sort of corporate citizens, like lots of others, I mean, those are the types of things that we would do, you know, automatically as a company in. We have 1,100 employees here on Vancouver Island, so
yeah.
Certainly it would be something that we would always look to do. But we'd be happy to have those conversations with staff and see what we can do. We really work with our municipalities to come up with agreements that provide for win-wins everywhere.
Sure. Okay. So, do we have someone in that's prepared? Okay, one more question from Councillor Lefebvre.
When we direct this to staff, could we include discussions or input from the Parksville Downtown Business Association? Given we've got the fire hall, this building, and the conference centers, could we include the Downtown Business Association and see how we might extend? You seem to be amenable to that, so maybe in working with the Business Association, we could see how that could be extended to cover a greater area.
We would be delighted to meet with them. We've met with lots of BIAs and chambers on this, so we'd be happy to work with them on that.
On that basis, Your Worship, I'd be prepared to make the motion to direct staff to work along with it.
So direct staff to work with Shaw Communications in terms of what an agreement might look like, and also to include the
ADBA for any input and any
Downtown Business Association
service that they might be able to provide extended onto that.
Okay. All right. We can certainly take that as a motion. So now we need a seconder, seconded by Councillor Greer. So discussion on that motion. All right. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. All right. There you are, Mr. Bray. So we'll have some of our administration be in touch, and we'll be back here in the future.
Council.
Thank you very much.
Slide back.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's carry forward because it's getting close to Christmas and we like nice short meetings around Christmas time, right? All right, so moving on. We are heading into correspondence at this point, of which we have 2 pieces of correspondence this evening. The first is from the Regional District of Nanaimo regarding the Northern Community Sewer Local Service Boundary Amendment Bylaw number 889.66. And I don't know if we need any background on this, but I'll ask for it anyway. Go ahead, Mr. Manson. Give us a little background on what it is that they're doing here, just for those in the audience that might not be familiar with what the Northern Community Sewer Local Service Boundary Amendment Bylaw might be.
Thank you, Your Worship. As with many of these items that come before Council, the sewer within the regional district and the city is based on a specific area. What this is doing is extending that specific area for a small number of additional properties, similar to what the city has done numerous times in the past.
Perfect. So we do have a recommendation there, and I'm looking for that to become a motion moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Powell. And is there any discussion on that motion? Being none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to our second piece of correspondence this evening, and this is from the Drug Abuse Resistance Education, otherwise known as DARE BC Society, and it's a request for funding to support Parksville's DARE program. And there is a motion there to receive for information, or rather recommendation. So I see that as a motion from Councillor Lefebvre and then seconded by Councillor Powell-Davidson. Is there any discussion? All right, so the mover first, Councillor Lefebvre.
Just very quickly, Your Worship, it's a very impressive program, and I'm wondering if we couldn't have them refer this to the Grant and Aid program as a means of supporting this particular request.
I'm looking over at administration, so I don't think that even requires a motion. We can certainly make them aware of our Grant and Aid program. Okay, so that will be done regardless. All right, and Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious. I support Councillor Lefebvre's look at the grants and aid, but I'm wondering how much we have on the contingency fund for council, if there's any left this year, or is it all gone?
Go ahead, Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, the 2013 council contingency was oversubscribed. However, in anticipation of this, 2014 is just a matter of weeks away, and you're starting a new slate.
All right, further questions on the motion? Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Thank you, Worship. I am very familiar with the DARE program. My two kids went through school in this area and were both participants in that. I highly value this program, and in reading the information provided to us, the correspondence, it shows that there's only a $1,300 shortfall. I appreciate that our motion is to receive the correspondence, and I'm pleased that Councillor Powell's asked the question about the contingency fund. I'm wondering if we couldn't have a discussion around actually contributing at this time. This is a very valuable program to the young people in our communities, and I can think of, many good reasons why supporting this program would be something that we would really want to do. We're planning for the future. We're educating the kids at a very young age and planting the best seeds we can towards a drug-free future for them, and ultimately, maybe not a drug-free community for ourselves, but certainly going a long way. This is a very proactive approach, and I'd like to see if there's an appetite around this table to investing some money into this program at this time.
Okay, well, I think probably since the motion right now is simply to receive, that might be something to bring up under new business and then have the discussion then. And certainly as a councillor, you can bring forward anything that you wish in terms of a motion. I just don't want to get us too confused around just where we're at right now. Otherwise, we're going to end up in this amendment to amendment kind of a scenario. Okay, so why don't we'll wait to hear back at new business on that. Further discussion on the motion to receive? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to reports this evening. We have one report from our Chief Administrative Officer, and this is regarding the Parksville Civic and Technology Center Provincial Server Room Lease Agreement. Mr. Manson, do you want to give us the background, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. This item is pretty straightforward. Through recent changes in provincial facilities within the city, the province has indicated a need for a small area for some computer servers. We have a little bit of excess space in the PCTC, and we've negotiated a lease of that area with the province for these servers. Approximately 80 square feet, not a huge area. It would be basically the hallway beside the main entrance into the administration right now. And they would pay all of the cost of installation, and as indicated in the report, a little above the lease rate that we're currently have for other areas in the PCTC.
All right, there's the background. We do have a recommendation. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell-Davidson, and discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on page 23, underneath background, second paragraph, they require a high level of security for the equipment. Do we have that in place already? Okay.
we have a number of our own sensitive systems as well. So. Further discussion? Looks pretty straightforward to me. Actually, looks good. Yeah, small, but whatever. All right, so with no further ado then, all in favor, opposed, and that is carried. Thank you. Moving right along here into bylaws for final adoption. We have two bylaws this evening for final adoption. It's the Shelly Road Park Dedication Bylaw and the Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 2009-0. We have a recommendation to essentially adopt both of those bylaws signed by myself, the corporate officer, and affixing our corporate seal. So do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor? Okay, well, if you don't want to move it, wait till it's on the floor and then I'll guarantee you. So moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell. So we now have that motion in place. And is there any discussion on the motion? Councillor Lefebvre.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I would like to have these two final adoptions split, if you would, please.
You want to split them in two?
Yeah, I do. I'll support one, but not the other.
Okay, do you want to speak to your rationale on the one that you wish to support, and we'll make note of it in the record so that you don't have to feel that you're supporting both?
Well, in the situation here, as far as the Shelly Road Park dedication, I'm in fact moved that, and I'm in full support of it. As far as the small lot residential at 780 Stanhope and 577 Pym, I am against that. I have voted against it, and I will not support it. And that's the rationale that I have.
Okay, very good. So are we clear that minutes will reflect that, so we know exactly where everyone stands? Okay. Further discussion on that recommendation, motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, opposed, and that's carried. And it is noted that you're not supporting the second of the two. Oh, no, we're good. We've done them both. But we just made sure that, because it is difficult when you group them, you have to make sure that everyone is supportive of each, and to what extent. Almost there, ladies and gentlemen. We're moving on now to new business. So I know we have at least one item to discuss under new business and potentially more. How many folks have something for new business? Surprising, shockingly. All right, so why don't we start with Councillor Neufeld, since we're going to be moving around here, and let's try and keep this as brief as we possibly can, eh?
All of the things that thanks very much, Your Worship. All of the things that I have to speak to tonight involve the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association. And I don't know if you saw in yesterday's Times columnist, there was a full-page ad, and it was really quite impressive. And I spoke to why do you want to come here? And it dealt, I think, primarily with islanders, and in fact, it was an interesting process where they're talking about reconnecting to Parksville, refreshing here, and enjoying yourself here. And there were a couple of sponsors there as well as the Tourist Association, people that wanted to be associated with us, and that's the Ironman desk and bed pull-out and Sam's not Sam's Furniture, but the M&M Furniture. So interesting how they've tied in, and we had a full-page ad on that, and I think really appropriate and of benefit both to the island and to people coming to the island. That was the one thing. That was the first thing. As far as the four gentlemen at the table, we wound up going to the Sunray Stairs last week and had an enjoyable picture taken that showed up in the papers. And I have one thing further to say about that. This individual sent me and made a compliment. A nice pic in the paper. I have a friend who's an avid fly fisherman. Fly fishing from the shore for salmon has gained popularity over the last decade. On the better fishing spots in the island, one is right at the foot of that Sunray Stairway. The water slopes out to a shallow of about 100 feet, then rises to a bar, then back down again. And if you put on a set of waders and fish off that bar, fishing can be extremely good. So, if you have any fishermen in the area, or a nice addition to the area as far as he's concerned, both the Sunray Stairway and the fact that there's good fishing right at the bottom of it. So that was one thing. Oh, there was another thing last night as far as the Bethlehem Walk. Really, really amazing. The number of people that show up for that. Again, tourism on the island draws people from around the island, and they enjoy it. It may not put any money into our coffers, but in fact, it's an appropriate thing as far as the family is concerned, and really quite enjoyable. So that's the fourth thing. At some point, I would like to make known that I would like to have a discussion about the ferry system. I sent out some material to you, and I'm not going to push it at this point, but in fact, a number of you responded as far as the ferries are concerned, and I think that we are going to have to look at the cost of ferries, the cost of bringing people here, the deterrent that may have, and I think that as a number of people have stated, there's a requirement that we personalize, the interest that we have as far as tourism is concerned, because in fact, it does supply 40 to 50% of the economic driver within the community. And with that, I will leave it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll move along. Before I do that, though, it's interesting with respect to the correspondence you got from the fishermen. Perhaps that's why every time I've gone down into that area, there's a sea lion hanging out, right? The sea lion knows it's a good fishing spot as well. All right, Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Thank you, Worship. And while it's all fresh in your memory, I'd like to go back to the discussion about the DARE program, and I would like to have the talk amongst ourselves right here, right now, see if we couldn't go forward with providing the shortfall in funding, and I believe it was $1,300, to keep this program going within the city of Parksville, because it sure is a valuable program, and it really does benefit our children and our community as a whole.
Do you want to make that a motion then? And then
yes,
we can get
I'd
it on
like
the floor to
motion.
discuss, assuming you have a seconder. So moved by Councillor Powell-Davidson, seconded by Councillor Lefebvre. So the motion on the floor is to provide a grant to the DARE folks of $1,300, and I'll open it for discussion. So go ahead, Mr. Manson.
As a suggestion, out of the 2014 budget.
All right, are you amenable to that amendment to your motion? So in other words, it would be to provide a grant out of the 2014 budget to the DARE organization.
I am. Did anybody get the sense that there was some urgency here for that money to go to them? And if so, is it possible to front that money before we get to 2014? No, it's not possible to do that?
Not unless you want it. So that's the question then. Are you amenable to that, or do you want to hold your motion at an immediate grant, which would have to come out of the current budget?
I'd like to hear from the other councillors, but before I make that amendment to my motion, if I may.
All right, fair enough. So why don't we just hold the line here? I think Councillor Powell had something to say, and a few other hands are in there.
It says in their document that they've covered the shortfall already with their reserves, but they don't have any reserves now. And so I think that waiting for the 2014 year would be sufficient. And we are going into budgeting. When do we do our budgeting for 2014? January?
Go ahead, Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell. We normally would have had the 2014 provisional budget to and approved by Council at this point. Unfortunately, because we're going through the DCC review, the DCCs are so entwined with the budget process, we have to get to a position of where we're at with the DCCs before Council can finalize the provisional budget. We hope to bring that back to Council end of January, beginning of February.
We have to have it all wrapped up by March, in other words. In essence, the 2013 through 18 budget that or financial plan that we approved does cover us for 2014. The 2014 through 2019 budget would formalize or would finalize that, and that has to be approved by Council by May 15th. May, that's what it is, right. Okay, so, but just before I let you leave the microphone there, with respect to the motion as it's worded right now, which is simply to provide this amount by way of a grant, and obviously would have to come out of this year's budget, what occurs?
If it was to come out of the 2013 budget, we would be, or the council contingency would be over budget. It's already over budget. It will be more over budget. As far as the expenditures are concerned, it's when it's actually made is what year it's allocated to. So if it was made any time on or before December the 31st, regardless of what you say it is, it would be a 2013 expenditure. Anytime after January the 1st, up until, of course, December the 31st, 2014, it will be a 2014 expenditure. We're of the understanding that there is no urgency for this, as Councillor Powell indicated.
Absolutely. It does appear that they've covered their shortfall for this year. So with that knowledge, are you more amenable to amending the recommendation, now motion, to come out of the 2014 budget?
Yes, Your Worship, I am.
And is the seconder in agreement? Okay, so the motion is then amended to include that component. And so on that motion now, is there further discussion? All right, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, there's no question that this is a good organization and worthwhile and so on. But what I come back to is here we are spending money in 2014. Last year, we were $17,000 over our budget on the contingency fund, and we're starting off before we even get to 2014 doing the same thing. I mean, we're spending money before we even get it. And there's all kinds of good organizations. We could be giving money out here every week, but somehow you have to make some tough decisions on where we spend our money. And to start spending 2014 money in December is not something that I would recommend. And I think we should give a lot more consideration each week that we have meetings to those who we give money out to. As I've said before, we're not a bank. People just can't come and we write checks out. I think we have to be very careful on where the money goes and when it goes. And as far as I was concerned, I was very upset last year when we went $17,000 over budget. There's no excuse for this. So I think we have to be more aware of our monies rather than who we're giving the money to. But it is a good organization, like many. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Greer. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to Councillor Greer's comments, with a program like this, I think it's one of those an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, because I think a lot of your money is going to be seen with prevention programs like this are going to shorten the amount of money you need to spend on police officers and crime and drug problems after the fact. That being said, because they've met their shortfall for this year, and I was interested to see that the call went out to the Parents Advisory Councils, or the PACs in town, and they got no money from that, which really surprises me, because obviously it's directly affected. It's kind of one of those user pay things. So why? I'd like to find out why the PACs aren't supporting the DARE program when they were asked to. If it was they were asked for additional funds on top of what they've already sponsored, or have they given no money to the DARE program? So I'd like a little more information before we make the decision. They're obviously not in a huge rush, so I'd be happy to personally talk to some of the PACs to find out what the issues are there. But I'd like to push this off until the next council meeting, seeing as they don't seem to be in a huge hurry.
All right, thank you. Councillor Lefebvre and then Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to point out to Councillor, through you to Councillor Greer, that we have $17,000 over on the council contingency fund, but I believe we had over $3 million surplus. So, I mean, it's you've got to look at the big picture, and the big picture.
It's no excuse to spend more money, though, Mark. It's no excuse to spend more money.
Okay. I'm sorry, I skipped Councillor Neufeld. Go ahead, Councillor Neufeld.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. The comment that I would make is basically, as Councillor Greer has said, a good organization. I'm not complaining about this at all. What I'm looking at is, as far as the funding is concerned, can we? Is there not money in as far as the line item of within the RCMP and providing them with a certain amount of money to support this particular program. Just a question that I would have for the mayor.
It's a good question. We're actually in a discussion right now with the regional district about providing a significant higher level of funding for a number of our policing services locally and enhancing the budgets there. And it's still in the budget process at the regional district level. So, but specific to this particular program, I'm not aware of anything that is occurring elsewhere. All right, so going back to Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so if you look on page 4, it talks about officer salaries are covered by the RCMP. The RCMP also recruits DARE officers from the Canadian Border Services. The federal RCMP and the BC Minister of Justice cover the salary costs of the RCMP drugs and organized crime awareness. Our education partners include 800 BC schools, and many community organizations generously contribute to cover a portion of it. And I think when you look at, I think that there are partners that are paying part of the cost already. And if you look at the PAC programs, I think you need to look at what their mandate in it is. And I think a lot of the PAC programs run now are buying meals for the kids, the hot lunch programs, because all of that stuff was downloaded, I believe, in 2002. And so now they're providing that for our kids. And, you know, as somebody that works in the Ministry for Children and Families, I see what happens to the youth that end up out on the streets and they're into drugs and stuff. And I think this is a small price to pay for the health of our communities. And we have to remember, while we have a large population of seniors, we also have young people in this community. And it's about time, I think, that we started to acknowledge that and provide things in this community for them. So I think it's $1,300 is pretty small.
All right. Now, is there anyone else wishing to speak? Because I was going to make a suggestion, because I know Councillor Morrison was talking about deferring this. I mean, you can certainly bring that motion forward if you wish. There wouldn't be any discussion on the deferral. There would have to be a seconder, and then we would simply vote. And then it would come back to us in the new year. That is an option for you if you want to pursue it or not. It's up to you. If not, I'll just call the vote on this. Okay, so any further discussion on the current motion? Go ahead, Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, some of you may want to wash my mouth out with soap for what I'm about to say.
What else is new? Go ahead.
The motion, the way it's put forward right now, is a one-time. I'm beginning to think that this is an ongoing program. Council may want to consider this in terms of a line item in the 2014 and on budget, as opposed to a one-time council contingency item.
I thought it was going to be such a short, simple meeting. Can you check in the washroom to see if there's some soap, Amanda? All right, so that's something to consider for council, although that isn't the motion that's before us, right? So with respect to that motion that's on the floor right now, is there anything further you wish to say to that motion as the mover, Councillor Powell-Davidson, with your hand up?
No, Your Worship, not to the motion, although I would like us to consider Mr. Manson's suggestion, but I think it's worth having a chat with the DARE people first to see if that's a necessity.
As we're still in the budgeting process, that would be a totally appropriate thing to bring up during budget discussions, and can certainly, yeah, we could add a line item if that was something the majority was willing to do. All right, we have a point of clarification from Councillor Powell.
So just so I can be clear what I'm voting on, it was the motion that you brought forward to provide the money from this year's budget, or did you change it to
next year's budget?
Okay.
Yeah, given that they had the reserves covered. So the motion before us is simply to provide them a one-time grant in that amount from the 2014 budget, and it would be expended obviously after January 1st. All right, no further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. All right, thank you. Moving on. I think you've used up your new business credits. All right, let's move on then, please. Go ahead, Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Oh, don't sound so drained. Okay, Council, you may recall prior to going to the AVICC, I brought forward a resolution to get the AVICC members to, that's the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Community members, to vote on sending a resolution forward to the UBCM to encourage the province to beef up the response times, and that was as a result of the earthquake we had over a year ago. The UBCM voted, I believe it was almost unanimously, that we would, the UBCM, that we would lobby the province. Now, fast forward to this past week, I had a conversation with our emergency program coordinator, Aaron Dawson, and he has just heard from the province that absolutely nothing is going to change. I find this completely unacceptable. So this evening I am asking you to support me in my request that the mayor and staff work together to prepare a letter to send out to the Union of BC Municipalities and copies to all of our Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, continuing to put pressure on the province for an update or to replace the provincial emergency notification system, which simply isn't adequate or working, in order to provide a more adequate notification to all coastal communities in the event of a natural disaster. We can't let this one go. I really think this is important, and not just me, our emergency coordinators. We know this is important, that the province respond in a timely manner following an emergency disaster, or a natural disaster. So that's my motion, that we request a letter to the Union of BC Municipalities, and you have copies of that.
Right.
In front of you.
All right, so we have that motion before us. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Greer. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we're good? Moving on. Councillor Lefebvre.
Very quickly, Your Worship, thank you. At the Englishman River Water Services board meeting last week, our key water individual, Mr. Mike Squire, brought up the following, and I'm making this as a notice of motion this evening. The Englishman River Highway 19 crossing was one of the first bridges built as part of the Inland Water Highway project. Bridges built after this have incorporated a higher standard of care by directing the road surface drainage from the bridges to the water quality detention ponds. Redirecting the road surface drainage scuppers from the bridge into water quality detention ponds would greatly reduce the risk of contaminating the Englishman River in the event of a fuel spill, dangerous goods leakage as a result of a vehicle accident. So my motion is that the mayor write to the provincial government, Ministry of Transportation. This is what it looks like at the present time. You can see that the drain goes right into the river. That a letter be written asking the provincial government to redirect the road surface drainage scuppers from the bridge into water quality detention ponds. That's my motion.
Notice of motion or motion? Notice of motion. All right, so you'll bring that as a formalized motion at the next meeting, or do you want to make it a motion right now?
I'd rather make it a motion tonight.
We seem to be on a run, so why not? So moved by Councillor Lefebvre, seconded by Councillor Greer, and any discussion on that motion? One thing I will actually point out, it's interesting, although we are in the process and have been approved to move our intake site up beyond the bridge for a variety of very good reasons, even when that occurs, there are still residents, I understand, in the Martindale Road area, which is the regional district, that are actually taking water out of the river as well. So there would be probably some support amongst those folks at least to do anything that could ultimately help protect that water supply. All right, so any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Very good. Anything else, Councillor Lefebvre?
Just very, very quickly, on behalf of the City of Parksville, I sit on the Transit Select Committee, and the BC Transit and RDN Transit staff are currently working on finalizing a long-range transit business plan. Further, the RDN board has directed staff to perform a review of Route 88 in Parksville, and RDN staff will also be reviewing the entire Oceanside area. This review will take place in the beginning of 2014 once the RDN board has approved the RDN future plan. So that's for the information of our good citizens.
Thank you. Moving on to my left, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure what to do with this. It's the new upgrade on Temple Street. And one of the things I've noticed already is there's signs going up on each side of the street to slow down children playing. And I have spoken to engineering, and they're going to have some stop signs along that route, and then the circle is going to remain where it is on Rushton, I think. Is that the name of it? Yeah. And so I want to put this in early before they actually get to the work, because, you know, it's getting more and more busy, that street. And I forget what name that was, the name of the road where they put the speed bump, where they were connecting up to church.
I know
and
the one, yeah.
I'm wondering if we could be proactive and get something like that done while they're doing the upgrades to it. If we could put something in, I would like them to look at it.
Okay, so I don't know if we need a motion for that. Could we have someone from engineering contact Councillor Powell to talk about the possibilities, and then perhaps at the next meeting, if it does require something like a motion, we could do that? Okay, very good. Anything else, Councillor Powell? All right, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been talking to the business people on 19A, Ladies Mantle, and Donna and Tim Andres, and Larry Adams, who owns the restaurant at the Orange Bridge. And Robert Held is a new artist that we have in town. He's a world-famous glassblower. And they are still concerned about the way the highway is designed on this side of the Orange Bridge. And I was going to make a motion tonight to have the staff look into that. However, I discovered through some staff help that we already had a motion in August 19th to do exactly that. And so I've made Fred aware of the other motion that was made, so I don't have to make another one. And he has been apparently waiting, or engineering has been waiting for some survey to be done, which is now completed. So we should hear from staff in the very near future what they might suggest for that highway. Something has to be done because we have business people there and it's hurting their business. And I think a light maybe at the corner from Martindale and Pioneer Crescent would suffice there. But we have to do something, and I wasn't aware until I was put onto this motion that actually Councillor Lefebvre and Powell made on August 19th, and nothing has been done other than waiting for the survey. So it's been done and accomplished, so we should hear from the city staff in the very near future. Thank you.
I do recall that, and yes, it's in the hopper. Councillor Morrison, did you have anything to add? Make it 1,000 bat here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of, actually, just one thing. I am working on a couple of things that I'll bring back to council shortly. The one thing I did hear, and given the season that it is, the SOS I know is, I heard on the radio on the way in, is short about $23,000 in their funding. So just if you're out and about, I know there's lots of Christmas parties and things that we're going to, and different events where they've got SOS hampers. Just be generous with your donations, because they are feeling the pinch at this time of year.
All right, very good. All right, we've gone all the way around, and that leaves us now with the next item, which is adjournment. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Lefebvre, seconded by Councillor Powell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried, and we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, for spending this time with us.